This is the Fitness Wisdom Podcast.
This is a dedicated episode to the best moments of the Fitness Wisdom Podcast 2025. If you want to listen to any of the clips in full, comment below and I'll send you the full podcast episode. Support the show by smashing that like button. Now on to the episode.
So melatonin is a hormone, and it's a hormone that's produced in a couple of different places in the body, and it serves a couple of different roles. One role that I think most people think of when they hear melatonin is it helps us to fall asleep. And certainly that is a portion of what it does, but that's a very small portion of what it does. The vast majority of what melatonin does is it acts as a key repair pathway signaler and a key antioxidant. Meaning it really truly is designed to help our tissues and our cells stay healthy, reduce inflammation, keep our mitochondria healthy. And if we can do that, then we have cells that are thriving and we have tissues that are thriving. But if we're lacking in melatonin, then we run the risk not only of having poor sleep, but at the same, we're not able to then repair our cells while we are asleep, or and we're going to talk about this, I'm certain, repair ourselves during the day as well, because we make melatonin during the day. The vast majority, right, of the melatonin we make is during the day, or it's designed to be. And if we're not doing that, then our cells start to accrue damage and they lack repair mechanisms. They lack mechanisms to essentially remove themselves from a tissue. A cell has a program to remove itself from a tissue called apoptosis. And if that's a dysfunctional cell, and if you can't remove those dysfunctional cells, they can divide uncontrollably and also start to create a cancerous environment. So, melatonin is essential. And I think it's underrated that we assume that all it does is help us fall asleep. And certainly there's a huge supplement market that is kind of portraying that as the main message. Whereas I want people to understand that melatonin does so much more.
Like, people don't look like people anymore. We're starting to look like aliens.
It's crazy. I think you're absolutely right. And a ton of it has to do with, they're not connecting with the key sources of energy and information. And because of that, the body is degenerating at a lot faster rate. Now, interestingly, with this melatonin, again, going back to Russ Ryder, the melatonin researcher, he found that he's taken cells that are cancerous. Okay, so let's break this down, right? So you have mitochondria inside of a cell that are becoming dysfunctional because of the things you were talking about. It could be too much blue light, too much non-native EMFs. It could be a toxin exposure, glyphosate, right? And so you get mitochondria that are starting to make metabolic damage in too much reactive oxygen species. And we're not then under the correct lighting during the day to help to calm that damage. And so this damage goes out of control. And what happens is the mitochondria begin to no longer be able to be the energy producers of the cell. And the energy production switches to the outside of the cell, in the cytosol, in the fluid of the cell. And that's called a Warburg metabolism. And it's a very inefficient metabolism. It's a metabolism that has to hoard glucose to make very little ATP. And so, but that's what happens when a cell becomes dysfunctional to the extent, and it's not just cancer, this happens in various autoimmune conditions as well. It's just a hallmark that we've overwhelmed the mitochondria with some form of toxin, and we're not obviously giving the mitochondria what it needs to sustain healthy oxidative phosphorylation. And so then what he showed, though, is he's taken Warburg cells, so cells that are in this very unhealthy cancerous metabolism, and has given them the correct signal of melatonin, and they revert back to mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation. He called it, quote, the study title was something like part-time cancer. And he said, well, gosh, melatonin is so important that we can actually take cells that are in this unhealthy, really dysfunctional metabolism and bring them back into a healthy mitochondrial metabolism. And my question is, does it have to be part-time? Because he saw that during the nighttime, these cells were doing it. During the daytime, they were flipping back to cancerous. But as we know, now we're designed to make melatonin 24/7 in various different ways. So I have a feeling that we can do, if you were to repeat that study using the correct exposure of melatonin signaling at night and the correct exposure of near infrared light to make melatonin during the day, you could actually take those cells that were in that dysfunctional metabolism and revert them to fully healthy all the time because you're sustaining the appropriate melatonin.
Wow. Well, he just blew my mind. That was amazing. And so basically, what I understood from what you just said there, that the cancerous cells are sort of like the backup mechanism for the body to produce energy for the body, because the mitochondria are not functioning properly. They're not actually there to cause us like issues, because many times we think that everything that's happening to us is happening to us and not for us. Right. But the body is always working for us and never against us. It's always doing it as an adaptation. Right. It's trying to keep us alive, basically. So that just blew my mind. So it just helps us really understand what cancer actually is. It's just really like when the cells can't make the energy anymore, then there is this backup mechanism that there is involved in the body that is just trying to keep the show going until we create the right environment within the body for them to revert back to. And I didn't know that they could revert back to, healthy functioning cells and mitochondria. That's just amazing. That's incredible.
Guys, if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and the like button. Now back to the show.
Ultimately, we go through seasonal cycles. We are a seasonal circadian creature. And so to kind of strip away the seasons in the sense of, manipulating the light and dark cycle in that way is really detrimental in my mind. And I think that ultimately during the summer, you have longer light cycles, meaning there's more light out and there's less darkness. During the winter, there's longer dark cycles and there's less light. And so there's a purpose behind that. We'll get into melatonin. We'll get into the different metabolites of vitamin D. There is, the human body is incredibly sophisticated in its ability to essentially transition or switch programs from a circadian standpoint. So, winter, summer, fall, spring, they're all there for a reason, obviously. And I do think it does more harm to us from a physical perspective, but there are deeper layers to this kind of disruption, whether it be mental, emotional, spiritual even. So these are all things to be considered. And essentially, melatonin and vitamin D have some shared benefits, whether they're anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, antioxidants. And I think these benefits carry over into winter as well. So when you're maximizing light during the summer, during winter, you're looking to maximize darkness as much as possible, along with maintaining those principles around light exposure. So for me, this is like one of the biggest questions that I get, but I tell people, you want to go outside, even if it's cloudy or snowing or raining, because you're still getting an incredible amount of infrared.
Yes.
And that's going to, near infrared typically is going to make that endogenous melatonin during the daytime. Then when it gets dark and you have more darkness, you have to be really strict about maintaining that darkness, whether it's 4 p.m., 5 p.m., even 3 p.m. for some places. And that's going to be a little bit of a mental shift for people when they're new to this work.
Yes.
But, wintertime is essentially a prolonged phase of incredible recovery and regeneration. So this is why I want people to really map darkness, because all that time during darkness, they're producing that pineal melatonin. And, you go down the list of how many benefits it has systemically. So I think that's very important. And ultimately, I think this is a freeing piece of information as well, because it means that you don't have to buy a vitamin D supplement. You don't have to buy melatonin supplements. That is kind of it's kind of an archaic mindset, let's say, where we're trying to introduce this new mindset of like, look, we just have to be aligned with the seasons, and a lot of the stuff is free. So, it just makes sense in my mind, and it's easier for people. Discussion of, look, like things like sunrise and nighttime darkness, those are nature's most powerful chronic disease prevention strategies, period. I mean, again, all anti-cancer defenses in your body are under circadian control. So circadian alignment optimizes those processes. But if you're living like the average person and not watching sunrise and making it super bright at night, you're destroying those defense systems, which over time, God forbid, opens the door for cancer. So these are things that are rooted in first principle science. These are things that I think should be put at the heart of the discussion in society, because look at the cancer rates in 2025. Look at the chronic disease rates. It's absurd. I mean, at least in the US, I think it's 7 out of 10 people have at least one comorbidity. It's crazy to think about, but it's a real issue. All hormones are circadian hormones. There isn't a single hormone in the body that is divorced from circadian mechanisms. So you can point to the difference in certain hormones, like, certain hormones are diurnal and others are nocturnal in terms of their pattern and how they work. But all hormones are circadian in nature. And fundamentally, if you look at the absorption spectra, they also absorb and emit specific nanometers of light too. So that's a very interesting idea that I think just supports this idea that, circadian mechanism, married to hormone optimization, essentially.
Based on my research, this is the best shilajit in the world. Here's why you need to know about shilajit. Shilajit is a herbomineral substance made from the decomposition of plants and bacteria, this process taking place over thousands of years. It's harvested from the Altai and the Himalayan mountains. Think of it as a hyper-concentrated plant matter that is made by Mother Nature over thousands of years. In many cultures and traditions, it's known as the destroyer of weakness. Let me tell you why. Shilajit is loaded with ionic minerals which are the most biocompatible with our human body. It also has a very high concentration of fulvic acid. This fulvic acid allows those minerals to get into the cell and do their work. Minerals are absolutely essential for all processes of the body, from having good energy levels, enhanced cognitive function, hormone optimization, and so much more, you name it. This is why I use Shilajit on a daily basis, because it works on a foundational level, on a mitochondrial level. And we know that we need healthy mitochondria in order to produce cellular energy. Something very important to mention is the quality of Shilajit. The one I use has been tested for heavy metals and impurities, ensuring the highest quality Shilajit. So if you want to experience this incredible ancient substance and find the one that I use on a daily basis, head over to the description below and use the promo code attached to get a discount on your entire order.
The number one system, I'm going to stress this like crazy, the number one system that cleans you out from the inside is your lymphatic system, right? If that has an issue, you will be more prone to chronic inflammation, chronic pain, autoimmune disease, all these things that are taking human beings out all the time right now. And that's why my life's work has been devoted to teaching you how to work that system, flush out the system, and clean the system, because there's ways that you can really do it way more efficiently than you're doing now if you're doing other stuff to help yourself, or even doing lymphatic work with a couple of tweaks, because you're obeying the laws of physics and fluid flow, and then your body says, oh my goodness, this is great, because now I've got the underlying systems that have the capability to do what I'm trying to do, which is to help you heal, recover, and regenerate.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's so important for people to understand that you have to take care of everything, as you said, the outside and also the inside of the body. I think it's amazing that people are actually understanding that you can do something about it, and how you have so much power and autonomy over yourself, meaning that your body knows how to heal itself if you put it in the right environment to do so. And one quote which I love that you talk about all the time is, you can't get well in the same environment that you got ill within. And that is an absolute fact, because this can be not only from an environmental point, let's say mold or EMF or whatever, but it can be also a traumatic experience. So for
the body's really smart, is then you have to ask yourself, what does the body do if waste can't get out?
Not sure.
Stuff can't get out, then yeah. So this is when you have to think like the body thinks. It's trying to heal you and keep you from dying. And it says, oh my goodness, Perry can't get rid of his waste. What in the world are we going to do now? So then what the body does is it will create more inflammation, because it's trying to now even, I'm going to double down and give you more inflammation to try to kill the stuff that can't get out. So it just builds and builds, and you get caught in physiology, they call it a positive feedback loop. It just reinforces and it keeps building and building and bigger. And positive feedback loops in healthcare will kill you. Like that'll keep you in fight or flight, right? So, or inflammation. So it keeps building inflammation. And what it'll do is, if you have a lot of waste inside of you and it can't get out, the body tries to dilute the waste products. And the solution to the pollution of the waste products is it's just going to swell the container that the waste lives in, which means you get puffy and swollen and you hold water and you get the pitting edema and all this sort of stuff, and you get bigger like this, and then you're like, no matter what I do, I'm always swollen. Well, of course you are, because your body is trying to protect you. And then let's say that keeps going on and on and on, and then the body says, okay, Perry hasn't learned about the lymphatic system yet, so I'm trying to swell the person up, It says, what's the next option I can do? Then it uses body fat. It tries to take the waste products and the toxins and store it in the body fat to remove it from the vital structures that are deep in the body. So you get fat as a self-protective mechanism. And we know now that fat is actually an organ. It's an endocrine organ.
Yes.
And so what happens is that you'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. So here's the rub. What happens when people get fat or they get puffy? What's their normal solution? What do they do next?
Go to the
I'm
gym.
going to change my diet. Yeah, I'm going to change my diet and I'm going to start eating all good food, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm going to take all these different nutritional supplements and I'm going to start to exercise like a lot. All right. So you go to the gym and you exercise. What happens when you exercise?
Metabolic waste.
You actually, you have metabolic energy and you're breaking down, you're killing cells, especially when you weight train, and you're actually creating more energy and more what? Waste products. So what happens is you end up dumping even more waste into the body because of the exercise, but the waste that was already there can't get out. And then I'm adding more waste into it. So I've got double waste. Not to mention, you threw 50 supplements into my liver that can't process it. Now I've got more supplement waste going in. So I have waste on waste on waste. That's the person who exercises and they feel worse, or they usually end up quitting after 4 to 6 weeks. Or they may lose weight, but then what happens is it comes back and they gain even more weight. That's the person who says, I went on a diet and I did this and then I gained 50 pounds extra back. Or I'm exercising and it's like, I'm doing everything and I cannot lose weight. Well, the reason being in my world is because you're already stuck full of waste and you keep adding waste and the body will just say, okay, I'm not letting anything go. That's it. So it keeps you fat to protect you.
I mean, there's so many things that impact weight gain. Obviously, if you eat more than your body is capable of expending, you're going to gain weight. But it's not as simple as calories in, calories out, like a lot of the people say. That's like 1990s advice. Eat less, move more, right? It's true.
Yes.
You have to eat less than your body is you have to. It's just you can't get around it. But the thing with circadian biology and quantum biology is that light literally programs your metabolism. Light literally programs your mitochondria. Things like grounding, darkness at night, making enough melatonin at night. And we also make melatonin during the day with the proper signals. We need those things in order for our body's energy battery to essentially work properly. And so a lot of people are living lifestyles that are out of sync with these very basic things like sunlight in the morning, darkness at night, getting enough sunlight on the skin during the day to make subcellular melatonin through infrared light, getting enough far infrared light to expand exclusion zone water, again, really boosting that body's energy battery. And so there are things, yes, you have to eat less than your body is, burning at that point to lose the weight, but there are things you can do to support metabolic rate, to support your body's energy management system. And that's where the modern eat less, move more dieting advice falls short, is that they're not supporting the body from this holistic place of circadian biology and quantum biology, because you can quite literally look at metabolic rate studies and people that are not getting enough brightness in the morning, enough sunlight in the morning. For every hour they delay that time outdoors, BMI goes up by 1 point. There is some research to show that. And so very simple, free. You don't have to buy anything to do that. And it's basic.
Yeah, so that's actually what I wanted to understand from you, because you also say that basically weight gain is a loss of cellular energy, and you just mentioned that all of these things, all of these practices, they allow us to gain energy. And so what you're saying is that when the organism is gaining energy and it has enough energy to function properly, it's able to process that food that we are taking in. So from my understanding, what you're saying is that modern life, from artificial blue light to non-native EMF, therefore causing mitochondrial dysfunction, lowers metabolic rate because now the cells cannot process the energy you're taking in. So let's say we assume that a person has burns 2,000 calories, the basic metabolic rate. And now they encounter mitochondrial dysfunction and their diet is also at 2,000 calories. Now, before they were maintaining their weight at 2,000 calories per day. Now that they have mitochondrial dysfunction, because now their metabolic rate is, let's say, 1,500, that means they're basically eating 500 calories more than their body is burning. Yeah. Even though the body, cannot process it. So basically, this is the reason why we gain weight extremely rapidly when we start to experience more and more cellular and mitochondrial dysfunction. It's not the fact that we're necessarily eating more. It's the fact that our metabolic rate is tanking and our hormones are tanking, which are, supporting our metabolic rate. And therefore, we're gaining body fat.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge contributing factor that's overlooked. I mean, there's a lot of things that can impact metabolic rate, but this is definitely something that's very overlooked and very ignored. I ignored it. I thought it was stupid. But then I couldn't get pregnant and I really wanted to have a baby. And so I was like, fine, I will go outside in the morning. Fine, I'll wear these stupid glasses. Fine. I want to have a baby. And if this will do it, I'll do it. And the side effect of doing that, yes, it allowed me to get pregnant and stay pregnant, obviously, as my son's about to turn 3 this Sunday. But I lost 30 pounds in that process before I got pregnant. And I had been stuck with my weight probably a decade plus. I just couldn't get below a certain weight no matter what I did. And I was very frustrated. And now after my son is 3 and I'm 46, I'm actually leaner than I was even before I got pregnant because I've consistently, by about 30 pounds, I've consistently practiced these things over the years and they absolutely work.
Imagine spiking your blood sugar without eating cake, elevating cortisol, your stress hormone, without being stressed, and suppressing your body's most powerful sleep, antioxidant, and regeneration hormone, which is your melatonin. This is why I make sure to wear my yellow daytime blue light blocking glasses every time where I spend time indoors under artificial lights and in front of screens to protect my eyes from oxidative stress and my entire body. And if I'm going to be exposed to artificial blue light, especially after sunset, I'm going to wear my red lens blue light blocking glasses to support my melatonin production and release. So if you want to protect your energy levels, sleep, and biology from artificial blue light, head over to the description and you will find all of the links with a massive discount on my favorite blue light blocking glasses.
Humans are positively charged and the Earth is negatively charged with negative ions. And so essentially we build up free radicals in our body to fight against anything that's within our body or within the atmosphere. So think about things like cell signals or EMFs or even pollution in the air that affects the air quality or impurities in our water. When our body takes those things on, it creates free radicals to fight against them. So free radicals are great, but as we accumulate too many free radicals in the body tends to shut down and create inflammation. And that inflammation is what leads to most diseases, most modern day diseases. So essentially, when we touch the earth or when we're barefoot on the grass or using a grounding product, all of those free radicals that are accumulating in our body are neutralized by the negative ions in the ground. And as you neutralize them, then they don't have the ability to clump up anymore. And the body can start to go back to nature and heal the way it was trying to when it's not trying to fight against everything all the time.
Wow, that's awesome. So basically what I understood from what you actually said there is that those free radicals are not actually trying to harm us, but they're actually a good thing for the body. Basically, they're trying to defend, help our body out based on a stressful situation that we're encountering, but too much of it can be an issue. Sorry, there's a little bit of drilling going on in my building, so you might be able to hear it through the microphone. But yeah, so it's quite incredible. So basically, it's the same thing with reactive oxygen species, right? When we accumulate too much, it can be damaging, but in small amounts, it can be an incredible signaling, to the rest of the system to create coherence throughout the system. But basically with grounding, you make sure that you are minimizing the harmful effects of these free radicals, but you still get the beneficial effects of the signaling that what you need. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly right. So, the earth and the human body are both incredibly intelligent. But as we've moved away from nature, we've sort of lost touch with the healing properties of both. And yeah, so when the body accumulates free radicals, that's a really positive thing. But it becomes negative when it's a constant battle against these free radicals. I guess it's the same with insulin. Like you eat sugar or glucose, and insulin's
Yes.
role is to push it down, and that's a really
Yes.
positive thing. But when you're
Yes.
constantly feeding your body with glucose and the insulin's constantly having to fight against it, it becomes too much, and the body starts to break down and create inflammation. And it's the same with grounding. So yeah, just by getting out and being in nature and touching the surface of the earth, those free radicals can start to be neutralized. And that's the start of the process to removing inflammation out of your body. I mean, grounding is the natural state, but we're also, and that's one side of it. But the other side is we're so far away from our natural state with the way we live our lives now, like I was mentioning, being indoors all the time. But
Yeah.
I was running a little experiment last week just to show the voltage of electricity that was running through my body, both indoors and outdoors. So you can do this quite easily with a pretty inexpensive multimeter, which most hardware stores sell. So when I was sitting outdoors and I was in the middle of the country in Australia, like I was probably, I don't know, 2 hours away from the nearest major city, I was sitting outside and I still had 3 volts of electricity running through my body. And so this is coming from the electricity cables that are nearby, which are running electricity to the household. And it's also the EMFs and the cell signals and the Wi-Fi signals and things like that. And then I went indoors and I tested myself and I had 22 volts of electricity or energy running through my body, which is just a crazy number. And like 200 years ago, our bodies didn't have to process that when we were in our natural state. And so that's constantly bombarding us and creating that's where the free radicals are coming in to try to protect us and remove those from our body. But as soon as we stand barefoot on the grass, or as soon as we touch a grounding product, a grounding sheet, that goes down, the voltage goes down to almost zero. So all of that energy is removed out of your body, and your body can then work on healing the parts of it that it needs to, and not have to fight against things that are constantly coming into our lives.
I think that's definitely where we see a lot of the misinformation coming from, is this of the fear of carbohydrates, and this fear of this misunderstanding, I think, of why blood sugar goes up and why people have insulin resistance, and they don't, and not a misunderstanding of what causes insulin resistance.
Yes.
And it's very surface level. It's very symptom chasing rather than really looking at the root cause. But turning off the faucet doesn't fix the clog. If you want, and so that's the same here, same concept here we have with insulin resistance or the rising blood sugar. We got a clog in the mitochondria caused by the excessive fat oxidation. It's not letting the glucose in. So glucose is rising. Well, when you stop eating glucose, stop eating carbohydrates, you're essentially turning off the faucet. The carbohydrates aren't causing the problem. They are revealing it.
Yes.
They are pointing the finger at, look, we got a problem in our metabolism, in our mitochondria, not allowing the glucose in. And so turning off the faucet doesn't really fix the clog. You've got to get down there and you've got to fix the clog in the mitochondria. And once you do that, the glucose can go in, and then your sink drains, right? Your backup of glucose is able to be metabolized and used for energy properly. Now, it's a very simplified version of it. There's a lot of hormonal actions taking place that really involve the elevation of what we call stress hormones, although some people debate that name, but it's basically cortisol, adrenaline, and glucagon are involved at different times to create this stress response. Because what often happens when you have beyond the excessive amount of fat and the blocked mitochondria, those stress hormones also stimulate the release of glucose from the liver, and that those stress hormones are turning on not only the release of glucose, but if the liver runs out of glucose, it will tell it to make more. Those stress hormones will help take other substrate in the body, other material like amino acids,
amino
or
acids.
lactate, amino acids, glycerol, and that gets argued about, like what percentage of what. But I think what the real problem is the stress hormones, and they're causing this glucose production. And where the insulin resistance comes in is that normally in a healthy body, when blood sugar goes up and insulin goes up to handle that blood sugar, it turns off the liver's release of glucose. It's certainly not going to make more glucose from gluconeogenesis. It's not going to make more glucose, but it's going to shut off that valve. But what happens in this situation of insulin resistance is that even though blood sugar is going up and insulin's going up, it's not turning off the sugar coming out of the liver. So we have an excessive amount of fat, free fatty acids being released from fat stores to be remetabolized, to be turned into energy, blocking glucose. And we have a lot of glucose being released from the liver at the same time that normally would have been shut off by the insulin. So you've got a lot of energy coming to blocked mitochondria and a system that is, imagine you had a second source of water. You turn off that faucet, but you got a second source of water still bumping water in on a trickle, a little bit more. And so eventually you are going to still see the backup of glucose over time. So we have this system that's basically putting out a lot of energy, that it's more energy than your body can handle. And so then you have a backup of this potential energy, whether it's glucose or fat in the blood. And that's where people start attacking the symptom, which is the elevated blood sugar or the elevated insulin, but not addressing the root cause, which is the clog.
You've probably heard about red light therapy before and all the incredible benefits that it has to offer. But unfortunately, not all panels on the market are created equally. And this is why I only use and trust the ones that I have put in the description below. They have the highest quality panels on the market from build quality, aesthetics, and functionality. So if you want a massive 40% discount on my favorite red light therapy panels, head to the description below and make sure to use the promo code attached to get a massive 40% discount.
Well, the regular view of eye care is very camera focused. We need to have make sure our light is focusing in the center of the eye, so we have 20/20 vision, and that's important. Everybody wants to see clearly, but there's such a piece missing that a lot of people don't focus on, is that the eyes control the entire body as far as our health. The light that gets into our eyes is not just for vision. There's so many aspects of vision that control the physiology of our body, and our modern world has destroyed that. And there's so many issues that happen starting in our eyes that can, go to the whole body just based on our modern world and what it's done to us. So the eye makes its own hormones. The eye controls neurotransmitters in the body. The eye has probably one of the biggest energy needs in the entire body. So it's got a ton of mitochondria. Our muscles never stop moving. We make micro movements, over 100,000 micro movements a day, where our muscles are constantly these little tiny saccades, because if we just stare at one thing, the images would fade. So we need these fresh images on our photoreceptors constantly. So there's just so much energy involved in not just vision, but just the entire body. So there's a lot of interesting things about the eye. And again, we have cells in the eye that are not meant for seeing. We have cells that are controlling what every single other cell in our body does. So that I think is the most fascinating that I learned. I mean, I think that is hopefully common knowledge. I think that is becoming a little bit more common knowledge. Everyone knows, if you have too much light at night, you can't sleep. Like, that seems to be the basic that a lot of people have heard, circadian rhythm, things like that. But it goes so much deeper than that.
Yes. Wow. That's super fascinating. So let's dive into it then. Let's dive into all of the functions that the eye does within the human body beyond eyesight, because I think it's so important to illuminate this fact. So let's begin with with light entering the eyes. What's actually going on there, beyond us just seeing things?
So as far as what we see, we can only see a small portion of this entire spectrum of light that exists. So we just see basically the rainbow, right? We know about Roy G. Biv. That's what we can perceive as vision. But there's other aspects of the spectrum that are invisible, but we can still detect it. Our eyes detect it. And those are the most important parts that actually control a lot of our physiology. There's also the blue light aspect. So in our eyes, on our retina, not right in the center where we see the most detail, but kind of a little bit lower, we have cells called melanopsin. So those are photoreceptors that are blue light receptors, and they respond to a certain level of blue light, like sky blue. And it's every time that blue light hits those receptors, it sends a message through our optic nerve to a clock in our brain. And that master clock, the SCN, suprachiasmatic nucleus. Once it gets those signals, it's connected to every other part. So it's connected to the pituitary gland, and that's going to send messages to different parts of our body. It's connected to our sympathetic system, our nervous system. It's connected to basically there's the master clock that controls all the cells in our body. So blue light, we need that blue light to be the correct blue light. We need blue light to come from sunlight, because there's a certain level of blue light that happens. So when the sun is rising, we have the morning sun. It's a morning signal. It just tells our brain we're so intricately wired for how much blue light there is and what time it is, that every time we go outside, our body gets a new time and we get those signals. We also have, red and infrared light that we require for our mitochondrial health. So the sun The sun is a perfect recipe for our eyes. So I'm going to backtrack a bit. So when we're getting exposure in a perfect world, we're getting exposure to sunrise. So then we have the blue light, we have red and infrared light. Now, infrared light is a very long wavelength, very soothing anti-inflammatory wavelength that we physically need. First of all, our entire body needs it, but our eyes in particular need it because the red and infrared light are what mitochondria respond to. Now, mitochondria are responsible for the energy, for basically for keeping us healthy. And the eyes have a ton of mitochondria. As I said, they're very energy hungry. So we need that in light to come into our eyes to help us make hydration on a cellular level. Our mitochondria helps keep us hydrated, gives us energy. So we need those combinations to help us, especially early in the morning. It's actually helping us make more melatonin inside our cells to help us with anti-inflammatory. And we also need some ultraviolet light. And this is where I think the biggest hurdle is, because we're so conditioned to be so afraid of ultraviolet light, but we actually have all these receptors in our eyes for ultraviolet light, for UVA. There is some ultraviolet A light that gets through to our retina. It was not, and when we get those signals, that's actually controlling the local circadian rhythm in our eye. It's helping us with dopamine. We need dopamine during the day in our eyes to keep our eyes, so our eyes know what to do, so that we see well during the day. We make our own melatonin at night, and it's linked to light. Ultraviolet light is also going to help us link our neurotransmitters. It's going to help optimize serotonin and dopamine pathways that go to the brain and the rest of the body. It's going to release nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, when we're exposed to ultraviolet A, actually opens up our blood vessels and increases nutrient flow and oxygen and nutrients, and it's going to dilate blood vessels and just helps lower blood pressure, does all of those things, but it also helps with nutrients in the eyes as well. And the other thing it does is it connects to the brain. It connects to something called, POMC, which is something that connects to our metabolism, our ability to make melanin, and all these other things. So you can see that ultraviolet light in these different portions throughout the day are very helpful, especially in the morning. So again, those morning really important for us. And that has nothing to do with vision. It's red light. And the interesting thing about ultraviolet light, which most people are afraid of, is that it's always balanced by infrared. So if you get an oxidizing signal or a strong signal from ultraviolet, it has that balance of infrared in the sunlight. So as long as, I'm not telling anyone to stare at the sun there's different ways to do it, but we really need, as far as the morning signals, we need to optimize first our circadian rhythm. We need to optimize our neurotransmitters. It helps optimize our sleep patterns when we're getting that UVA and we're optimizing serotonin. Serotonin is what gets turned into melatonin at night. So we need those precursors to help us sleep. So we need all of these different aspects of light through our eyes to help us maintain proper health. And again, that needs to change the day.
There is one very interesting thing. It is gut-brain connection. And this connection from the gut to brain, it's very important because a lot of hormones and chemicals are produced in our gut. And because of this production, the whole our body, it's influenced by it.
That's insane. Yeah, so then you're basically saying that because it has this bidirectional relationship with the brain, like I've heard some people call it the second brain, which is very true, but some people even call it the first brain because of how many neurons there is down there, in contrast to the brain as well, and how much role it has over our entire biology, because our brain is sort of like a processing system, but the gut is giving the real information of how the whole body should respond. And I think it's so cool because when you realize that how your mood can be affected from your gut, your energy levels, like your immune system, your skin health, your digestive system, your performance, like your muscle recovery, even your weight outcomes, whether you are gaining weight or losing weight, or the fact that your hunger levels or your satiety levels, like all of these things can be influenced by the gut. I feel that's pretty insane.
Yeah, yes, and it is very good to mention also that there are more genes than we have as humans, as our DNA. It is 150 times more genes in our microbiome. That means that we are more what we are not. So 150 times more. We have more genes from this microbiome than our own genes. What means that in a sense, you are carrying around a second set of your genetic instructions that influence digestion, immunity, and even your mood.
That's insane.
And about this gut-brain connection, Gut communicates with brain through our vagus nerve and chemical messengers. And did you know that 90% of serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter, is actually produced in the gut and not in the brain?
That's super fascinating, for sure.
Because a lot of people think, okay, my brain produces serotonin. 19%
Yes.
is produced in our.
Muscle cramps, eye twitching, headaches, agitation and stress, those are all signs that I have magnesium deficiency. I can always tell when I haven't taken my magnesium. You see, magnesium is an absolutely essential mineral and is required in over 600 biochemical reactions across the body. I'm pretty sure we've all experienced that calf cramp in the middle of the night, and that is most likely due to a mineral or magnesium deficiency. And the reason why most individuals are deficient in magnesium these days is because stress depletes magnesium. And tell me a single person in this world who isn't stressed right now, whether that is physical or psychological stress. Magnesium is something that I'm very religious about taking every single evening before I go to bed. Because I don't only want to sleep 8 hours, I want to have a deep and restorative sleep. I know that when I've taken my magnesium, I wake up feeling relaxed and refreshed. So if you want to discover the magnesium that I use on a daily basis, you want to make sure that you head over to the description below and use the promo code attached to get discount on your entire order.
That melanin is a carbon-rich substance that organizes matter and energy across diverse environments. It absorbs energy from the environment and it uses it to organize matter, to maintain balance and homeostasis, and as well as to power the body. And I guess there are about 4 major functions of melanin that seem to be universal. So regardless of if it's found in human beings, animals, or plant life, it's doing these particular things. It's regulating energy, it's protecting, it's amplifying, and it's organizing.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's incredible. And you know that there are so many people who still think that melanin is a sign of skin damage, but maybe you could demystify that for us.
Yeah, melanin is it's not skin damage. So what melanin does, and especially if you are someone who's trying to increase the levels of melanin in your skin in particular, that's your body's way. When you get a tan or when you darken, that's your body's way of, it's amplifying the melanin that's there. And it's your body's way of maintaining homeostasis, of maintaining balance at this critical threshold that we call our skin. So no, it's not damage if you have melanin on your skin. That's a very good thing. That's a sign that your immune system, that's a sign that your body is doing what it's supposed to do, which is produce melanin in response to sunlight.
Yeah, exactly. And also the melanin, as we talked in our previous episodes, the fact that it's even found there in the embryo before, life even exits the womb, it just basically clarifies to us that it's one of those, let's call it an organ, right, that already exists within the human body. Clearly it has an essential role there to play.
Yeah, definitely. This is one of its most overlooked roles, is in the womb. Melanin is there before you're even born. So it's present on the tip of the sperm called the acrosome, and it's also present on the egg. And this is exactly where the sperm touches or meets the egg. There's melanin nanoparticles on the tip of the sperm and on the egg. And when they touch, when those 2 dark epicenters meet, when they make contact, there's a flash of light. And in biology, you may know that as the zinc spark. This is where you have this electrical activity that's generating light right within the womb. And when that happens, that's where fertilization begins. So yes, melanin is there before you're even born, right when you're conceived. And amazingly, it's there long after you're gone as well. So of your tissues, most of your soft tissues in your body, they decay. And then your bones eventually turn to ash. But what's left, millions, hundreds of millions of years after that, is only melanin. So they found melanin in fossils that are as old as 300 million years old.
Wow.
So yeah, it's there before you're born, and it's the last thing that remains of you long after you're gone.
It's incredible.
Definitely not skin damage.
It's basically an ancestral molecule, literally. Been here before we existed, and we'll be here way longer after we're gone as a human race. Who knows what's going to happen to the humanity in 100 years with AI and everything like this. Would you say that that melanin has magnetic like properties, for example? Like, does melanin sort of attract?
Yes, absolutely. So melanin is, I'm going to give some more context here too, because this is a very how do I say this? Something I'm very passionate about. So I definitely want to sort of preempt our listeners a little bit more with where this discussion is going, because as I talk about this, it's going to be leading up to something else, which is the Earth's electromagnetic fields and how melanin relates to that. So just to add some context for our listeners who may not be familiar with the concept of magnetic sensing or magnetoreception. This generally refers to when animals, birds, sea turtles, fish like trout, like salmon, when they migrate or they travel to specific locations, and they do that by tracking the Earth's magnetic field. They use it as like a type of compass almost. That's called magnetoreception. And this has been observed in those species. It's very well known. And they are able to do this because they have very special materials within their bodies, mechanical materials. They have crystals called magnetite that are sensitive to changes in magnetic fields. They have iron-based molecules in things like their noses, and like they have chromophores in their eyes, like proteins in their eyes. Like they have all these different tools in their bodies that are sensitive to magnetism. So when they are in a magnetic field that's exhibiting some extreme changes, they're able to pick up on that through their own, biological architecture. And so humans usually are left out of this conversation, though. Like where do we fit in that, and for our species? But this is something that I think is somewhat of an oversight, because I think it really boils down to this concept of materialism, where because we don't have the mechanical materials, or we haven't been taught to frame the biological material that we do have, we haven't been taught to view it that way. This has not really been a part of the conversation, is biological magnetic reception in the human species. So we actually do. So, like we, most of our soft tissues in our bodies resist magnetic pull, which is probably also part of the reason why that is not really something that's in, the center of the conversation in terms of our capacity to be magnetically sensitive, is because most tissues resist magnetic pull. And that's because they don't hold enough magnetic materials, like what I mentioned earlier, like the magnetite, the iron, those metals. That's what makes these animals magnetically sensitive. They have the metals that are properly calibrated with their soft tissues to make them more sensitive. So soft tissues have very weak, very, very weak interactions with magnetic fields. However, this is where melanin stands out, because melanin is a soft tissue. However, melanin behaves very different from other soft tissues in that it binds metals. So it binds things, copper, like zinc, magnetic materials, metals that have very high magnetic affinity. It binds to them and it absorbs them and it stores them within its own structure. So, I could say that in that way, it gives melanin some mild magnetic property, because it takes on these different magnetic materials like heavy metals, and it incorporates it into its own physiology. And then it's also a semiconductor. It conducts electricity, it conducts electrons, which is basically the foundation of magnetism. So you have two very core essential properties of magnetic sensing in this one particular molecule. So it's metal rich, it's rich in metals, it's absorbing, it's holding every known possible metal. and it's also conducting electricity at the same time. So that electrical energy can be aligned with magnetic fields.
I guess my question to you would be, for the audience and also for myself, how would you describe this energy? Like, how does it feel? So, for example, when you are building this bond and this connection with the client or the patient, how can you actually identify whether there is something wrong in the body energetically?
Well, it's a very gentle energy. It's not something that is super strong. It's a very gentle energy. What I do with my patients, like before treating them, I kind of scan their body. And by scanning with my hands, I can feel the blockage in my hands. So usually my hand is going to stop there, or it's going to feel like wants to contract. That is
Really?
like a certain type
Wow.
of feeling, yeah, that is something is there, you know? And by the location, the channels and points, and then I'm going to apply everything that I learn in school, because I can make something happen here. But first, I need to know where is the blockage. And of course, by talking with the patient and understanding life situations, lifestyle, and everything else, I kind of can complete the treatment. But the feeling of this energy is different for every single person. And I feel it, everything that they are feeling too. So the thing is, I had to learn also how to manage my time and how many people I see per day, because there is a limit of energy available, you know?
Yes, yes.
So in the beginning, I was seeing like a lot of people in one day from 9 to 6. I was trying to work inside the matrix, like from 9 to 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then, I was getting very, very sick, very sick. I couldn't move next day. And
Wow.
I had to learn that my diet has to change if I want to keep going and work with this type of energy. I cannot eat whatever I want. I'm going to have to support my body, because now this channel is open. Another type of energy is coming through. And if I have the wrong diet, the energy doesn't flow. And if the energy doesn't flow, I don't move. If I don't move, nothing happens with the patient, you know? So it was like almost like relearning how to live again. I had to relearn how to live. Now I know that I need to drink lots of water, mineral salts, go to the sun every 3 to 4 months, and stop and really get into nature. So, but this energy is supposed to feel very gentle, but the body needs to be very relaxed in order for you to flow with this energy, because I feel like the energy is available for everyone, is in the field. And if you tune in, you can kind of move with the energy and you can understand. It's almost like before my body was offline, and after opening up the meridians and removing the blockages, now it's online. Now I can reconnect with the field, and I can reconnect with people that it's in front of me, you know? So you cannot be rigid. Like you need to be kind of flowing. It's hard to explain.
So basically you are like an antenna in a way to like receive information from your environment and also the patient that you're working with. But it seems that, our modern world and everything modern and comfort these days has made us that our antenna is switched off or dampened, right? Because our intention and our thoughts and attention is now going towards things that don't really matter so much, in our reality. It's just more so that we're just focusing now on the wrong things rather than on the things that truly matter. We believe that the digital world is as real as the physical world. And this is something which is very dangerous, because a lot of people, when they get so hooked on the online world, when they see something online, they automatically think that it translates to reality. And the biggest example of this is what happened in COVID, where everybody was, locked inside and scrolling their phones and their tablets and their laptops. And basically it was the greatest compliance test to see whether something on your whether there's something on your screen is going to alter your consciousness, is going to alter your behavior basically and change the way that you act. And it did, because so many people fell for the big lie, basically, that actually happened. It was very unfortunate, but it was also a great awakening for many individuals, many people who were just on the brinks of kind of, waking up, like they had a total, wake up. And those who were not ready, they went into the opposite direction. But, we all get there eventually. But I'm just kind of saying how susceptible the mind is to, manipulation. And if you use things like technology, you can turn the body offline and away from its intuitive and natural senses. So I've heard people before say that hormones are carriers of light. Do you want to give your own description on that?
So I suppose what you have to look at, right? And it's not just limited to hormones, also like neurotransmitters as well. Like if we dissect that, so all steroid hormones are made from cholesterol. Cholesterol has got like a 4 hydrocarbon ring, and it interacts with light. We know that because cholesterol down the line will form vitamin D through 7-dehydrocholesterol. Mm-hmm. And then another thing, of course, is with the aromatic amino acids. So tryptophan, tyrosine, phenylalanine, and histidine, they all form some pretty crucial neurotransmitters as well as hormones. So you've got thyroid hormone and adrenaline as an example. Then you've got noradrenaline, dopamine, serotonin, melatonin. Like all of these things, like is it just a coincidence that they all happen? Like 90% of our hormones are connected to light. Like, and obviously the answer is when you dig a bit deeper in terms of looking at like the absorption and emission spectra of these molecules, that the answer is there is a deep connection with light here. And I think around hormones, so of course, like we got steroid hormones, so that's going to encompass testosterone, DHT, estradiol, progesterone, DHEA, cortisol, so on and so forth. But yeah, you just got to think like, what are hormones really? They are essentially it's information to determine what's going on in your external environment and as well as your internal environment. So we're talking not just like light and dark cycles here, but also temperature, also just what you eat. And then on top of that, of course, you got your internal environment, which also dictates what's going on with light in the form of biophoton emissions, which I would love to get into.
Yes.
And of course, like your emotional state will also dictate that. Breathing, like all these things will essentially dictate what's going to happen on that biophysical level to what hormones are essentially made. And I suppose like if we just go to the surface level in terms of what that encompasses from like external light, is that of course you've got like light in this, like in terms of sunlight and artificial light. And if you look at a rainbow, of course there's like 7 different colors, I believe, and then you got ultraviolet and infrared. And this light interacts with our skin through various photoreceptors or chromophores, which interact with light, our eyes, even our gut. And this light is essentially information. So it's like, okay, what should we do right now with the light that's hitting us? And of course, like by design, blue light, if you search it, like just search any emission spectra of like an iPhone or a computer screen, you're going to see these really sharp blue light peaks. And that happens to be the same spectrum for 60 to 480 as what suppresses melatonin, regulates the hypothalamus. So again, like you have these eyes inputs of light going down the retino-hypothalamic tract into the hypothalamus, which again coordinates with the frontal lobes, speaks to the brainstem, speaks to the pituitary gland, which again releases those hormones that act directly on the steroidogenic tissue. So like, for example, the testes. And all of it is just like this orchestra of light signals. So when, for example, like just for melatonin, it's like the domino effect in terms of what it can do. So when you have sufficient melatonin from darkness and sunlight during the day and then darkness at night, you're going to get that conversion from serotonin to melatonin. Melatonin will then act in the hypothalamus to allow for leptin to bind to its receptor. And then you've got like things like prolactin, growth hormone, and then eventually down the line, you'll have cortisol again. And then it sort of repeats in the morning where you need that light stimulation of blue. So when we go back to just like what artificial light is, it's these sharp blue peaks that not only suppress melatonin, but raise cortisol. So again, you've got these 2 master hormones that are on a seesaw essentially in terms of determining what's going to happen downstream with these other hormones. And of course, blue light at night, blue light throughout the day without UV and infrared, because we just mentioned that UV interacts with cholesterol and aromatic amino acids to build up all those neurotransmitters. We haven't even spoken about the infrared, but of course that's going to influence mitochondria, water, mitochondrial melatonin, collagen production, which again, it happens to be just all like semiconductors that are absolutely fundamental for our system running correctly. But anyway, hormones are essentially, they're going to get cleaved or they're going to get made determining by the information it receives. And it's not just light. Light is playing a big role Well, it is just light, but if we look at it from like the external standpoint, but it is biophotons. Down the line, it is these biophotons, extremely ultra weak biophoton emissions that are governing the release and coordination of anything found in your cells, in your organs, in your tissues, and in the whole body. It's essentially like this electromagnetic information. Kind of think of it like, I suppose, 1 million routers going off at once, sending information, you know? So yeah, it gets pretty complex in terms of that. And it's just like, well, with cholesterol and its light absorption and emission spectra, you can almost bet that there's going to be all these interactions down the line with these other hormones and neurotransmitters. It's just not a coincidence.
Wow. The microplastics really, they're a problem, but our real problem are nanoplastics. Microplastics is just the term that's been kind of widespread use that everybody understands, but microplastics are about 5 millimeters or smaller. And then your nanoplastics are like 1 to 100 nanometers, which is very, very small. But basically you can think of a microplastic as something that you need to see under a microscope. And there are lots of different names in the plasticizers, and there's so many different ways you can wrap it in. I just use microplastics a lot when I talk because that's a term that everybody understands. But our big problem is really the nanoplastics, because the microplastics get into your body through ingestion mostly, because that's the bigger particles. Now, a lot of them, as long as you have a decent diet, you can wash out. You know, you can, as long as you don't have leaky gut and you don't have a lot of other irritable bowel syndrome and issues like that, you'll flush it out through your feces. So that's not as big of a problem. But the nanoplastics, those are the ones that get through. They get out of your gut. They, you know, you breathe them in. They get into your bloodstream through your lungs. You get them dermally through your skin. You know, the nanoplastics are the big problem, and that's every plastic that ever gets created will eventually become a nanoplastic. So those 9 billion metric tons that have been created since the introduction of plastic in 1907 will become a nanoplastic, and it just gets smaller and smaller. The smaller it gets, the more places it gets into. With it, we have built-in biological barriers that shouldn't allow that to happen, but they just get so small and they get mistaken for estrogen more often than not. They can also coat themselves. The plastic is sticky. It's the way it's ionized, it sticks to a lot of things, including heavy metals, which is another big problem, like we see in the oceans. That's a big problem. But it also sticks to biological material as well, which then tricks the body. It's almost got like a coating around it that it looks like it's something it's not. So the body accepts it and puts it in a place that it doesn't belong, if that answers the question.
So the fascia system is a triple helix collagen fiber network that holds everything in place. So all of our nerves, muscles, bones, joints, lymphatic system, they're all held in a sponge-like collagen that wraps all of what we are. And as an athlete, my story with fascia is kind of different because I think there's 28 different methods out there for fascia release. And a lot of approaches came from, either a massage therapist or a researcher fixing their own problem. And I think that a lot of us have derived our solutions based on the problem that we focused on. So the problem that I was focused on as an athlete was that I had sustained 3 significant injuries on my right leg and not on my left. And I went through the standard protocol that every athlete is given, every elite tournament professional out there. And as I trained with over these, 3 areas of pretty severe scar tissue and what I would call a true fascia adhesion, where bands had, because they were sliced they were sliced at the same time, they had healed in a coagulated way, like a knot. And there's currently no method to get that out other than just, Rolfing would find the spots with your fingers and then rip it open. And in that ripping and shredding, there's bruising, there's tearing, there's shearing, there's inflammation, and you certainly can't train on it. So I wanted a very specific way to release the fascia adhesions, the restrictions, and the densifications in a way that allowed the tissue to rebound back. And what I looked at in the fascia that was a little bit different than how other people look at it is these major structural bands. There's 8 major bands that are braided together fascia. So everything in our body is being held in place by fascia. And in some areas it's very thin, like our cheek. Like we could blow our cheeks out and put them together. But our plantar fascia, the thing that holds your arch in place on your feet, that's a very dense version of fascia. And it's, imagine if these little hoses, these little tiny nanotubules that make up our fascia stitch themselves together. And the way that I often describe it is if we have one straw, it's very bendable. We can kind of cut it in half, right? And break it and bend it. But if we have 50 straws together, very difficult to move those around. That's like these major structural fascia bands. And we have 8 of them. And I like to look at it like a harp. You know, the body is standing because of these 8 major bands. And the balance and the symmetry between these major bands are going to control our joints. So if we think of a runner who's run the same number of marathons on both knees, but one knee is aged very differently than the other, why does that happen? You know, is it our walking gait on that side is thrown off? Are we using our toes differently? Is it, did we have injuries down those major structural bands that are holding tension so that every time you run, the knees are just a little unbalanced, the hips are a little unbalanced? So my look at fascia as an athlete is if I want to run, jump, and recover well, I need to keep my major structural fascia bands symmetrical, balanced, and fluid. There's a lot more that can be done in the fascia. And, you know, if somebody has severe surgeries, there's different ways that we would handle that. Like there's a little machine now that I love promoting because it rehabs where the nerves are no longer firing. But if I'm an athlete, I want to make sure that these major structural fascia bands are not tight on one side, ready to break. I want to make sure that they're both, you know, the tension is the same. So I built a system that helps people map out their own fascia without a therapist. And it just requires a ball. And we use pressure, a very specific sequence, to identify where the restrictions are within the fascia. And then we have a little vocabulary, it's just 5 words, and we identify what the highest priority is. Because if a therapist comes and leans into our body and is like, oh, it's tight here, oh, it's tight here, that's great. But for you, you can feel so much deeper into your body and you can tell, is it tight or is it radiating? When you hit that spot, do you feel it in your knee or your hip? Does it feel electrical? You know, is there a little bit of a live wire feeling inside of it? Because that's going to be the highest priority. A therapist can't feel that for you. So a lot of my process is about building the awareness of how to increase the hyaluronic acid within the body. That's been my method of restoring the fascia, is instead of hyper focusing on the densifications, it's more of getting a read of where the tension is, and then how do we create more of this fluid that the fascia needs to glide within the system. And then we allow that more fluid, that more feeling for things to fall back into place. So even in my system, you can't train every day. It's maximum 5 days a week because it changes their structure so fast that you have to kind of let the body catch up. And depending on what's created the densification, there needs to be a conversation internally with yourself of, is it my chronic posture? You know, do you have a buildup on your upper hamstrings because you're sitting down 8 hours a day and you need to get a stand-up desk? Or you need to, get up and do some squats every 45 minutes and do the lateral ones so that you're stretching out the inner thigh. Are you crossing your legs? Like I have women that are like, why do I have an adhesion on my inner thigh on this leg but not the other one? And then they realize like, oh my goodness, I cross my leg with my left leg over my right all of the time. So there's lots of chronic posture, chronic training, bad shoes that can lead to really debilitating fascia issues, but the body wants to heal. So when we give the body what it needs in order to remake the juice that goes around the fascia, we can pull it back into place without the shockingness of ripping, bruising, and shearing, which is, as an athlete, what I'm looking for. I want something that, you know, is a good maintenance. You know, it doesn't cost me $200 every time I want to do it. Something that can keep me, you know, spring loaded, that can keep my knees and my hips aging at the same rate, and keep this fluid going. And that fluid hyaluronic acid is actually called the anti-aging serum. It's often added to skincare solutions. But we know that there's a cell hidden within the deep fascia that actually creates this fluid. So if we do the right things, we can actually ask this cell to remake all the hyaluronic acid that we need. It doesn't need to be supplemented. It doesn't need to, you know, be applied topically. We need to just work with the systems within the body to activate it.
In 1991, these Japanese researchers, they looked at young men and they did cold after exercise, which was what everybody was doing. Use cold for recovery. Testosterone and luteinizing hormone both went down. But then for some reason they reversed it. They did the cold and then they did the exercise. Testosterone and luteinizing hormone went up. Well, Andreas, I wasn't doing the ice baths to recover from kind of some strenuous workout. I wasn't running 3 miles a day, you know. I was doing the ice bath because I was afraid I was going to die of prostate cancer. So when I got out, of course I would exercise. I would do some push-ups or pull-ups, or I'd go for a walk. Not a lot of exercise, but just enough to get my blood flowing back into my limbs. It was exactly the protocol that the Japanese study said would boost my testosterone, and it did. So I wrote an article about it. I put it up, you know, on the internet where everybody could read, you know, these brilliant findings of mine, and nobody cared. You know, Google ignored it. Nobody was looking at morozcoforge.com, you know, for advice on testosterone until Joe Rogan found it. And he put it up on his podcast. And he explained to David Goggins, this was December 2022, that he'd started this protocol of doing his ice bath in the morning and then doing some exercise. And David Goggins was like, well, that's crazy. You know, how's that working for you? And Joe said, it's working. Then people all over the world found the article. They started reading it. They started doing it because they wanted to see what happened. They started sending me their labs. And that's really what happened with my book, Uncommon Testosterone. It explains what happened to me, what happened to my prostate, what happened to my testosterone. It's got the case studies of men and women, by the way, from all over the world. It says, this is why your testosterone goes up. It turns out that every sex hormone in the body originates as pregnenolone synthesized in the mitochondria. It is the mitochondria that are responsible for producing your sex hormones. So when you do things that support your mitochondria, exercise is good, magnesium is good, zinc is good, sleep is good, get all the seed oils out of your diet, it's good for your mitochondria. And one of the best things you can do is cold plunge therapy because it stimulates mitobiogenesis. Now you have more mitochondria. They are of a higher quality because of what you've been doing in the cold. It's no wonder your testosterone levels go up. So that's the genesis of Morozco Forge. Some people come after me and they say, you know, this guy, he's fabricating the science so he can sell more ice baths. And they get the order wrong. After I figured out how incredible the science was, backed up by my own experience, I had to start fabricating ice baths so that the world could have access to what they needed to keep their metabolism healthy, their testosterone levels up, their energy level up, etc.
Oh, yeah.
So ironic. Our industrialized modern world that makes us so comfortable is also killing us. So everything that my grandfather, you know, used to consider a hardship, we now consider therapy. My grandfather used to chop wood so he could, you know, run the wood stove in Maine the whole winter. And so he's getting his exercise and he'd be so sore at the end of the day. Now we go to the gym because what he used to think was a hardship, we consider a therapy. Well, cold is part of that. It takes about 2 weeks for your body to recruit brown fat in response to daily cold stimulation. My people come from the North Sea. I come from seasonal latitudes. I'm supposed to have summer and I'm supposed to have winter. The problem is I live in a high-rise apartment building in the hottest city in North America, in the middle of the desert in Phoenix, Arizona. I don't get any winter. I need an ice bath to maintain healthy levels of brown fat. Now, some people might say, what's the point of brown fat? 20 years ago, medical doctors thought there was no such thing as brown fat in human adults. They thought it was only something that babies had, and then everybody grew out of it. But it was in Sweden when they were doing PET scans with cancer patients, and they said, we think we found brown fat in grown-ups. And they published a couple of papers. I think this was 2007. And so other cancer researchers started looking at their scans, looking for brown fat. And sure enough, about 5% of the cancer patients scanned showed visible brown fat on the scans. What that meant was 95% of these patients had zero detectable brown fat. If you do not get cold on a regular basis, you lose your brown fat. And maybe some people are saying, I'm okay with no brown fat. I'm just going to keep the thermostat up and I'll stay warm. But brown fat is not just about thermogenesis. Brown fat is an essential secretory organ. So it makes, for example, neuroprotective factors, FGF21 and brain-derived neuroprotective factor 3 are associated with higher levels of brown fat. Your brown fat takes care of your brain. Your brown fat also communicates with your thyroid to regulate your metabolism. When you have no brown fat, there is nothing to modulate your thyroid function. And so many people who are separated from the cold will wind up with a thyroid disorder, either hypo or hyper, that can be corrected by 2 weeks of regular ice bath therapy. Now their body recruits new brown fat that communicates with the thyroid, modulates its function, and brings it back into the normal range. It's brown fat that will convert inactive thyroid hormone into the active form of thyroid hormone. So the brown fat supports the thyroid, and the thyroid signals the brown fat. When you don't get cold, you lose your brown fat, you lose an essential metabolic and neuroprotective organ. It is no wonder you get sick.
We are creating light, and we see that biophotons, that was a term that was used by Fritz Albert Popp, and he was sort of a pioneer in this field. He really piggybacked on research from Gershwich, who was looking at onion division, right? How does an onion divide and grow? And he was looking at the roots of onions, and he put onions in quartz containers, and he would put the roots together. And when he did that, he would see them rapidly divide and grow. When he put them in opaque containers where light couldn't be transmitted through the containers, he saw that they didn't divide, that there wasn't this cellular growth. And that's where this idea of light signaling in the body started. And Popp certainly expanded on this idea. And he found that biophotons are created in our mitochondria. Every time we create a molecule of ATP and water and infrared energy, we're creating a biophoton, or what people are calling a ultra weak ultraviolet light emission. And it's weak in the sense that we have a hard time seeing it. It's actually not weak in the sense of its strength. And we see them created in our mitochondria. They're created in our DNA and some cellular processes. And what Popp really pioneered, and many researchers have confirmed and are continuing this work, is that these biophotons aren't random. So it's not just like, okay, the mitochondria are creating ATP and we see these blips of biophotons, and the DNA, there's blips over here, and it's just associated with metabolic action. They're coherent. They are being used, it looks like, because of their coherence, they are being used as messengers in the body. They are being used as light messaging in the body. And when we think about what's happening in the body, we see that there are so many different molecules and cellular proteins that can pick up on light emissions where there is no traditional light, right? Where it's a dark environment, the gut, for example, or areas in the brain where light isn't penetrating to these deep internal structures, yet there are these flavins and opsins and different proteins that are meant to pick up on light information. And biophotons are incredibly sophisticated. So you see that a cell that is stressed has really high levels of biophoton emission. It's kind of like a SOS, like, hey, I need help. Things aren't going well. And then you have healthy cells in this Goldilocks zone where they are, not too high, not too low. They signify a healthy functioning cell. And then you have these damaged dysfunctional cells that are on their way to being removed from the body, hopefully, on their way to death. And they are creating very low biophoton emission as if their light and life are going out. And this is something that we see in our cells, certainly, but we also see it in the microbiome. We have research out there showing that different species of microbes in the microbiome have their own unique biophoton emission. It's like their own voice, really, their own signature. And they are communicating with each other. So there's this incredible research study where a certain species of bacteria is put in a photo modulator, a box where the light is completely blocked. It cannot get into the box. And there's another species that is in a similar box, and they're not, they're close, but they're not touching. And the researchers started injecting one of the species of bacteria with hydrogen peroxide, which is not ideal for life, right? That's a very stressful, dangerous environment. And not only did it change the biophoton emission of the microbes that were being exposed to the hydrogen peroxide, like, this is intense. Biophoton emission is going up, just like we talked about with cells that are stressed and their biophoton emission increasing. But the box that was next to them, that was a different species of microbe altogether, it also responded to that light emission of the other bacterium. So we see that they are not only having their own unique biophoton signature, but they're communicating with this. And it's just starting to lay out this map or this picture of how the body is communicating with light.
So let's do a definition first. Psychoneuroimmunology is that intersection point between psychology, behaviors, emotions, mindset, nervous system, immunology, endocrinology, pathology, physiology. Basically, everything is connected to everything. And I came upon PNI, psychoneuroimmunology, because in practice, I was seeing that some of my complex chronic condition patients were getting better because of a change in mindset or because of a change of emotional circumstance, and not because of supplements, drugs, or a ketogenic diet, let's just say. And I had some patients who were on the perfect protocol for them, the perfect protocol, but they weren't getting better because they were orthorexic or they were anxious about their food. And, we've all been with people who are so anxious about eating clean or, no gluten, no dairy, whatever it is, that you can see the anxiety coming off them, vibrating off them. They're vibrating at a much different level, and it's not healthy. And then once you go down that more spiritual, emotional consciousness pathway, you realize how important bioenergetics is. Electromagnetic fields, the kind of things that emanate from your heart, from your soul and your brain. And then you put it all together. And I started to get better results with my patients when I was acknowledging and accessing these different aspects to their treatment profiles, not just take this supplement, take this diet and do this exercise. Like it became far more than that. And I remember one day I said to my best friend, I'm like, I feel like I'm doing some sort of, I don't know, like psycho, neuro, endo, immunology type thing. And then I Googled it and there was such a thing.
Wow.
I was like,
That's
okay.
crazy.
And this field has been going on since like the 1970s, 1960s. And it's only just gaining traction now. And the reason why it didn't gain traction then is because of the way that the different organ systems were siloed and how the different doctors were siloed from each other. So if you have a lung problem, you see a respiratory physician. If you have a heart problem, you see your cardiologist. Even though the lungs and the hearts are so intertwined, really, you can't be treating one without the other, or at least acknowledging the other, right? And that's why in our modern medical paradigm, when we're sending patients to specialists, the specialists aren't speaking to each other. And then before you know it, this patient is on 6 drugs. And the GP, who doesn't have time, right, and they're so under stress, the best they can do is like just repeat the prescriptions by these specialists. And so nobody is taking that 20-foot look at this patient and seeing how things are connected. Because you can't give a patient a drug for their insulin resistance when you find out that the insulin resistance is because of excessive blue light exposure and poor sleep. Sort out the light diet, sort out the sleep, all of a sudden you don't have insulin resistance, the patient doesn't need to be on drugs. So this came to it was all from experience with patients, and the patients taught me, so much. And so now I've kind of dedicated my career at the moment in trying to learn more and more about these interactions between these different organ systems, between, things that usually aren't the realm of doctors. So psychology, emotional health, spiritualism, consciousness, because they make a difference. And more importantly, from a non-objective perspective, if it makes a difference to the patient, then it makes a difference to me.
Yeah. But like these are universal to all people. And like as humans, I believe that we're designed to be doing this stuff and we're meant to be doing this. And if you look into like even like 400 years ago, we were doing this stuff all the time. We were getting sunlight. We were depending on natural lighting sources. We weren't messing around with this. Like, did you know that influenza never existed until EMFs came, like basically a thing? Like influenza, there's no known cases of it until EMFs were introduced into society. So like basically it's a matter of figuring out these modern adaptations now that we know that we have these pervasive environmental toxins such as isolated blue lights and EMF. Even things on the gut like that are damaging it. Like if you're eating ultra processed food for 20 years and then training like a madman all throughout high school and all throughout your 20s because you want to look like everyone else or whatever, I hate to break it to you, but that's probably not the best idea for your gut. And if you're genetically prone to these issues, it's going to lead to a whole host of other issues. And out of all of this, I didn't even talk about the mitochondria yet. That is like the most important part of this entire picture. And that's why I bring up the lights and the EMF, because those are very important for your mitochondrial health. And even getting like that morning red light, it's going to be really important because that's actually going to hit your cytochrome C oxidase in the actual mitochondria, and it's going to lead to the synthesis of your subcellular melatonin, which is basically your master antioxidant. Like I see a lot of people talking about glutathione injection. Well, the OG glutathione injection is going outside, grounding, and getting morning sunlight. Like that's literally 100%. Because it's for getting all of those actual benefits.
Yeah, so a healthy foot is sensorially stimulated. You can feel it. You can connect to it. You have very good mind-body perception, which means you know where your foot is without actually looking at your foot. When you walk, you are going up the stairs, down the stairs, jumping, changing direction, and you never have to look at the ground once because you have such a tuned-in awareness where your foot is in space. It's very, very important. 2 is that you have a strong foot, but a strong foot has to be connected to your center of mass or your core. So strong feet are connected to strong core muscles. That's very important. Also, the power of the foot or the strength of the foot actually lies within your toes. So you need to access your toe strength to really harness the strength of the foot. Third one, really, really good sensation. So you have to have very healthy nerves with good circulation. Circulation is a really, really important part of a healthy foot. When I talk about circulation in feet, it's actually microcirculation. So it's the itty bitty blood vessels going to the skin, to the fascia, to the nerves. And that's an important part of how we keep a healthy foot. And then just a recovery component.
And the fact that our nervous system needs stress in order to build resilience. It's like a muscle. So your vagus nerve as well. Your vagus nerve is like a muscle. You can exercise your vagus nerve. You can do things for your vagus nerve to make it stronger, to make it more resilient. And the more resilient we are, the better we can handle stress. So we can put ourselves in stressful situations if the situation is safe, which is a good thing. So so taking cold water plunges, it's a safe environment, so you can do that. Playing sports, doing exercise, those are all stresses to the nervous system, but they're good stresses because they're in a controlled environment and you're not going to feel like you're overwhelmed. It's a situation that you can get out of, which is very important for safety. And so it's really important to build those kind of stresses into your nervous system to make it stronger, to make it more resilient. When you look at the vagus nerve, we use something like your heart rate variability, your HRV, to measure your vagal tone. Your heart rate variability is a space of is the time difference between each heartbeat, and that should vary. So your heart shouldn't beat like a metronome.
Yeah.
And so the higher the variability over a period of time, over a minute or 2 minutes or however long you want to measure it, the higher the variability, the more we know, the more resilient the nervous system is, and that's an indication of your vagal tone. So definitely when you have low HRV, it basically means your nervous system is not that resilient, and that's normally linked to physiological issues and sort of health related problems. So definitely, yes, we get the bad stress, but we need the good stress in a controlled environment to build the muscle of the nervous system, for sure.
Touch, and one of the ways that you can fortify yourself, your body, your mind, and your spirit is to start with the body where it's accountable and it's real. And now you master body. And guess what? Brain and body, it's the same thing. Everything in your body is a root system for your brain, and your mind. Your mind derives from that entirety. It's not just in the head where it is. It's systemic. It's in your gut, right? You have a gut feeling, right? We are energetic beings. We're spiritual beings. And if you walk out of balance and your exercise is reinforcing walking out of balance, well, then you're doing something that will create more damage in terms of unfulfilled potential than you can even imagine, by simply making the adjustment of walking with balance.
If you guys enjoy the topics and guests I bring on the show, I would really appreciate it if you left me a 5-star review on Spotify, and also subscribe to Fitness Wisdom Podcast on YouTube as well, as this helps to spread the knowledge and wisdom with the world. Until next time, this is the Fitness Wisdom Podcast.